Hi, thanks so much for joining me. This is Dr. Richard Herbold. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about adrenal fatigue. So when you look at adrenal fatigue as being kind of a catchphrase in the literature, it's really not. And what I mean by that is most people who have signs and symptoms of fatigue are put into a bucket of having adrenal fatigue. Now just know that adrenal fatigue is real. The adrenals are two little mushroom caps that sit on top of your kidneys and make all sorts of interesting hormones. On the top of the list of the hormones that become dysregulated is cortisol. And cortisol has a rhythm. Cortisol is high in the morning, drops down, about 3 or 4 in the afternoon you get another little bit of a peak, and then it drops down at bedtime, and then it actually rises up when you sleep. So when you have adrenal fatigue, the first question is, in your cortisol rhythm, your circadian rhythm, the normal biorhythm in your body, are you in normal limits during the day? So cortisol, first thing in the morning, wakes you up. It's a glucocorticoid. So cortisol has a glucose effect of blood sugar. So first thing in the morning, it should be high to wake you up because your blood sugar needs to rise up. Now, if it's low in the morning, you're going to be fatigued. If it's too high in the morning, you're also going to be fatigued. So it's like the 3 bears in the porridge. It needs to be right in the middle, and it needs to be in perfect concentration. Now, during the day, as it drops, our blood sugar usually follows that. And then 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you have a little bit of a spike again. That's oftentimes for people looking for coffee and donuts and all sorts of stimulants. So just know that the circadian rhythm, or the highs and lows, are actually modulated in the brain, in the temporal cortex of the brain, in what's called the hippocampus. So when we have cortisol dysregulation of rhythmicity, it's actually a brain problem. It's not necessarily just the manufacturing plant. So people who are given adrenal supplements and glandulars oftentimes don't get better because they're not addressing the brain components. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of these glandulars and a lot of these supplements, including pyridoxine and pantothenic acid, B5 and B6, and a whole confluence of other herbs, are very helpful for reducing the dysregulation of adrenal function. But the underpinnings to most conditions are complicated. They're not just the manufacturing plant not working successfully. So let's get back to the rhythmicity. At bedtime, cortisol should be low. So people who can't get to sleep at night tend to have an upregulation of cortisol, or a high level of cortisol, because it's a glucocorticoid. It keeps you awake. Now, if you're too low at night, that's also a problem. Now, what happens when you sleep at night, when cortisol should be elevating, so let's backtrack this a little bit. So depending on what you had and when you had dinner, assuming you do eat, and you do eat at dinner, is you have a certain bolus of food, or the amount of energy from that food that you have, that then has to last the evening when you're sleeping. So normal adrenal function allows for cortisol, which is low at night, if it's normal, to elevate to keep you blood sugar regulated, because your brain still needs sugar. Even though you're shutting down metabolically to heal and repair and do all those wonderful things of deep, restful sleep, that's assuming you have deep, restful sleep. That's when we actually excrete human growth hormone for repair of muscles and things. This whole process is very complicated. So that's why when you look at adrenal fatigue as a background noise for a lot of problems, there are nuances that are just beyond having Addison's disease or Cushing's disease, which are disease processes of highs and lows in cortisol. It's well beyond just pathology. It's a functional problem. So when you sleep at night and cortisol is elevating, if it works correctly, if you run out of cortisol because your adrenals are really, really fried, the next thing that happens in the adrenals is we excrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are called catecholamines. And boom, on goes the light. So those are the people that when they're sleeping at night, they wake up at, let's say, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly they're in a very high level of alertness, or they might even be startled when they wake up in the middle of the night. They might start with hot flashes, which oftentimes is associated with menopause, which is a whole different discussion. And menopause and sleep irregularities and hot flashes are also connected to adrenal function. Because when women go through menopause, their adrenals now take over the production of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So pretty complicated, right? It is. It's very complicated. So just know, if you feel fatigued and if you feel as though adrenal dysfunction is part of that, it probably is at some nuance. But if you've been dismissed because your cortisol levels in your blood tests are normal, just know that a functional problem in adrenal dysfunction is still very likely as part of the puzzle that you're experiencing. So I hope that's helpful, especially if you've heard before, there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. The adrenals are part of our survival mechanism. It's part of our ancient process of survival to be able to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. And when it starts to fail, there are all sorts of terrible signs and symptoms that people have. But also understand that there's probably not just one mechanism in adrenal dysfunction. It's very complicated, as all physiology is. So my attempt in creating this website is to educate people. So keep your eyes open for other videos talking a little bit more about physiology. But as a beginning point, I hope this is helpful to understand a little bit more about how the adrenals function. And yes, there is help for people with symptoms of adrenal dysfunction. So this is Dr. Richard Herbold at Capital District Vitality Center, and I'm most pleased to see you and be with you today. Thank you so much.